Thanks for joining me. My name's Derek. This is Addict MMA, and let's talk a little bit about UFC Fight Night, Dos Anjos versus Cowboy Cerrone 2. These are my predictions. It's going to be a great fight card. I can't wait for it. It's just a couple days away. Let's start this thing off. Miranda Marcos out of the Ultimate Fighter house is taking on newcomer to the UFC in her debut, the undefeated 7-0 Karolina Kowalkiewicz. I've watched a couple of these girls. Carolina has fought in Invicta. Marcos, like I said, she fought her way through the Ultimate Fighter house and has definitely proved herself to be a tough opponent. What I've noticed about Marcos is that as tough as she is, as gritty as she can be, she tends to be. I want to say I don't want to say a pressure fighter necessarily because she doesn't come at you balls to the wall, but I've noticed in her style that sometimes if she's pressured, she kind of feels the need to step back, recalculate, reset, and then go for a right hand or then work on her striking again. Um, Against a tough grappler though, that's kind of what makes the difference with Marco. She's coming into this 5-3, so probably a good opponent for Kowalkiewicz to take on for her debut. That being said, Kowalkiewicz, very, very good high pressure fighter. Her striking is great. Well, good. It's very good. She strikes in volume. She's very aggressive. She gets inside. She works the uppercut. She works the overhand right. But her ground game is also very tough. And against, like I said, Marcos, who, in my opinion, if you put her up against a good grappler, decent enough to really put some pressure on her, then you'll notice that she'll lose her breath. The gas tank will kind of deplete a little bit quicker. She can scramble a little bit. I've noticed that when you take her down, she tends to be able to try to spin over and kind of just carry your momentum so that she can try to sweep, but it doesn't work out for her all the time. I'm going to say that Kowalkiewicz wins this fight. Probably be a decision, I would imagine. She's gonna pressure Marcos, and eventually this fight will end up on the ground. And I think when it happens, that's when Carolina's gonna really be able to take control of the pace of the fight, wear down and grind on Marcos, and probably get the win. Next fight, pretty cool fight. Nate Diaz, who desperately needs a victory, is going up against Michael Johnson, who as of late has done pretty well. I think he's got one loss recently. It's not a big deal though. I mean, ultimately he's not doing as bad as Nate Diaz is doing. And I'm a Diaz fan. I love the Diaz brothers. I think they're great. I enjoy their style of fighting, the high volume of striking, the jiu-jitsu ability. Obviously, Nate Diaz has finished more of his fights by submission than knockouts. But all that aside, I think Michael Johnson's really starting to come into his own. And I believe that he will get past the Nate Diaz striking because Nate Diaz is another guy who's tough as nails and will stay in till the bitter end. He's been in 5-round grinding wars, and he's been backed to the rope. So I don't think this is a guy that Michael Johnson's going to come out. He's not going to knock out Nate Diaz, and there's a good chance he's not going to submit Nate Diaz. However, his wrestling ability, I believe, will be enough to kind of stalemate that jiu-jitsu of Nate Diaz. I don't see Nate Diaz getting a submission on Michael Johnson. I think if Michael Johnson can take this fight to the ground, there's a good possibility he might be able to kind of grind out a slow fight. A stand-up is tough to call, but at the end of the day, I'm going to give this one to Michael Johnson. I just think he's been doing a lot better lately than Nate Diaz has. I think Nate Diaz has only got one victory out of his last 4 fights, and that's got to tell you something. He's really not been as great as he can be, and he really desperately needs this fight, but I don't think he's going to get it. Then the co-main event, we've got Junior Dos Santos taking on Alistair Overeem. And, if this were a fight that was made maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I'd have been even more excited than I am now. Problem is, Alistair Overeem, though he's not on necessarily a losing streak by any means, the fighter we remember from Pride isn't the fighter we've got today. He seems to be a bit slower. He can explode, and when he does, it's nasty, it's vicious, it's scary. Most of his fights that were finished by submission as well. We forget about that because lately he tends to want to just bang and knock people out, and that kind of seems to be where the in America anyway, where mixed martial arts is headed, where the fans would rather see something finished with just bloody knockouts. And I got to tell you guys, it's mixed martial arts for a reason. There's a craft, there's an art form, there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of hard work that goes in to being a top-notch grappler. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes I'd rather stand and spar with somebody than have to roll with a guy who could seriously, I mean, the grinding pressure of somebody who knows what they're doing. I think sometimes the American fans don't give the ground game enough credit. Anyway, I digress. Alistair Overeem's chin as of late has been pretty suspect. I'm not sure that he could take too many punches from Junior Dos Santos. The best bet for him will be to try to get Junior Dos Santos to the ground, which is not very easy to do. At the end of the day, I mean, Junior Dos Santos, his chin is very strong. We've seen him through some seriously good wars. I mean, Cain Velasquez in those two fights beat the piss out of him, and it took him knocking him. He basically knocked his own self out in their second or their third fight. I think that he's going to knock out Alistair Overeem. I'm pretty sure that that's what's going to happen. Junior Dos Santos is a tough guy. He's a little bit more on point with his striking, and I mean, this could turn out to be a really awesome slugfest, but I don't think so. I think that Alistair is going to kind of walk in like a zombie with his hands down, and I think that Dos Santos is going to capitalize. Dos Santos is going to end up beating him, and it's going to be a pretty fantastic, highlight reel knockout. That's my opinion. Moving on to the main event. The rematch. Rafael Dos Anjos, the champion of the lightweight division, taking on Donald Cowboy Cerrone. They fought the first time back in 2013 when Cerrone was like ranked number 6, and I think Rafael Dos Anjos was like ranked 10, and that was a fight that kind of started to propel Dos Anjos to the point he's at now. So it's all come full circle. Now, Donald Cerrone has been like the most active fighter on the roster in the last year. He wanted to fight so much that he even asked if he could continue to fight up until the title fight. And, of course, the bosses were like, no way. We need to make sure this title fight remains this title fight because anything can happen. In the first fight, Cerrone didn't really engage with his hands as much as I'd have liked to have seen. He looked like he was a little bit, I don't want to say confused, but the body shot followed with the hook was definitely put him. It confused him a bit. He was having a hard time with it. Dos Anjos is very quick. He's very well rounded. The guy's got an amazing ground game. His striking is on point. He's very powerful. However, I just think that Cerrone, that's been a couple years now. I believe that Cerrone, as active as he's been, has obviously learned his lesson. And to think that he's not in the gym calculating this, watching tape, figuring it out, that would be a dumb move for any fighter to not. So basically what I'm saying is Donald Cerrone, I believe, is going to be the lightweight champion after this night is over. We probably could see a 5-round fight because in their first fight and in many of Cerrone's fights, he tends to be somewhat of a late starter. Then he finds his groove. So it's very possible that could happen again. He might come out a little cautious, knowing he's got to pace himself for 5 rounds and wanting to make sure he has his gas tank full for the entire fight. I believe he's going to come out. I don't know if I really would just think this is going to end in a decision. I don't want to say one guy's going to knock the other guy out. Both of them have a strong enough ground game that they can kind of, they'll go back and forth, but nothing fantastic will happen as far as there won't be a submission, there won't be a knockout. I don't think, not unless it was led with, a standing strike that put one of them down. But at the end of the day, I'm going to go with Donald Cerrone on this one. I believe he'll be the champ, and he'll be the one that, gets to fight Conor McGregor next for the lightweight championship that Conor McGregor wants so badly. So there you go. Just a couple weeks from now, we've got January 2nd, Robbie Lawler versus Carlos Condit for the welterweight championship of the world, which I can't wait. Robbie Lawler is a phenomenal champion. He is a warrior against Carlos Condit, who is a guy who is one of the most dangerous men in that division. We're not going to get into it now. Tune in for the next video. I'm Derek. This is Addict MMA 2. Subscribe to the channel. Please leave your comments below if you have anything to say, good or bad. I don't care. Just throw it at me. But do subscribe so that you can be updated with, whenever I post new videos. My email, addictmma34@gmail.com. If you have questions that you would like me to answer on video, or if you have ideas for video topics, shoot me an email. And follow me on Twitter, @justderek30. Thank you very much for tuning in. See you next time.